This is a story of how I put 17p in the bank to 25k a month at the age of 20 years old. From a very early age, at 14, I knew that the traditional path was definitely not going to be for me, and I'm here to tell that story today. Yes, it has not been easy. Yes, it's been incredibly hard. I can tell you now, it's been incredibly worth the wait. To be honest, from a very early age, I looked at the traditional path and just thought that it wasn't for me. Why on earth was I going into school from a certain time to a certain time on a certain day of the week to then learn knowledge? And I always used to question, why am I even learning this knowledge? How I'm going to apply this? I was always the kid to ask, how is this going to work in the real world? But yes, I did all right in school, but not by no means I was the perfect student. I didn't really care too much about it. I always used to look at the long-term path of a 9 to 5, and when the teacher used to come to me and, what do you want to do? To be honest, I never used to say, I want to be this great business owner. I didn't really know what to say. And that is when it started clicking that all these people that work in 9 to 5, they have no freedom, and they work for someone that does own the business, that doesn't work a 9 to 5. So for me, at that point onwards, I knew the traditional path was not for me. And if you stay to the end of the video, I'll tell you exactly how I built a £250,000 business at the age of 20 years old. From a very early age, around 14, I remember sitting in business studies class and realizing the traditional path was not for me. I asked my business study teacher, Miss, why don't you run a business if you're, so knowledgeable around the subject? And I remember she could not give me an answer. At that point, I started to get into, looking into the future of the 9 to 5 world. I realized everyone is living paycheck to paycheck, struggling financially. They do not have any freedom, and quite frankly, live a very unhappy life, not being able to do what they want to, when they want to do it. And another thing that dawned on me was like, okay, all these people, they work for someone with a business. So the guy at the top, he must have done something completely different to everyone else and not part of this typical rat race that most people find themselves in. At 17 years old, this is the first time I really did feel like something was wrong and that I had a lot more potential to give. And this exact instinct is what makes me £250,000 a year at 20 years old and puts me in the 0.1% of owners in the UK. Look, if you're feeling this right now, act on it. I promise you now, you're probably watching this, working incredibly hard on the wrong thing. I used to watch all these guys online make so much money, and I just kept on thinking to myself, how on earth are they doing it? So on my 18th birthday, I got given a bit of money from family, about £500. I dumped all that money into an online course. First time ever, because I thought, if they can do it, why can't I? And that exact decision, that exact delusion is what brought me here today. And that £500 course was what led me to the business model that changed my entire life and led me to success at 20 years old. And that business model was high ticket sales, my friend. I then built my income to 2-3k a month, end of 2023 and early 2024. This is where then I decided, look, it's time for a change. I need to learn something bigger and better. And I bought my first big mentorship for £6,000. It was the scariest decision I've made. However, also taught me the lesson that, look, investing in yourself isn't that scary. There's no risk as long as you're acquiring knowledge. From this, I was able to sign my first manageable client where I'd make my first 5k a month, or so I thought. I remember I was in Barcelona. It was May of 2024. I'd go out for breakfast. I got a call from the client. It was the day he was meant to pay me out, and he dropped me, which was pretty much fair enough. It taught me a lot of lessons that life isn't that fair sometimes, and there's always going to be ups and downs in business. Now, look, most people would have quit. I think that was the deciding factor of, look, if I quit, I would have ended up working a normal job. But something in me told me that I need to carry on. There's always going to be an up when you're on a down. Now, luckily, instead of getting that 5k, I managed to get £1,500 that I then, once again, invested into a high ticket closing program. Now, this is the real vehicle that took me from zero in the bank, really struggling for money, to the real knowledge of sales and making 10-15k a month consistently. The May to the August of 2024, though, was probably the hardest time of my life. But I also learned the most about myself. Learned that I had this work ethic that I didn't even know about. August 2024, I worked 14 to 15 hours a day. I was working from 12 p.m. midday UK time to like 4 a.m. and I made £150. That was the point where I really wanted to give up. I literally remember writing and taking a video saying, this is, just sort of documenting and saying like, this is it. I'm going to probably, look for a job. I actually looked for a job at Sainsbury's, landed it actually and worked there for a week, but I wasn't necessarily going to stick around for too long. Then September of 2024 hit. This is where my life completely changed. I joined a new offer with a new team, and these people I still speak to every single week on FaceTime. They're all from Canada and America, and I have a lot to thank from them because they gave me an opportunity. I took the opportunity and I worked my ass off every single night. Once again, till 3, 4 a.m. and made my first 3.3k. It was, hang on, for the first time in about 6 months, I saw money come into my bank, and that was the breathing route. And this taught me you are always one connection away from changing your entire life. After that, I then hounded my friend for a closing role, which I landed. And then this is where things got fun. From that October then to early 2025, I was hitting 5k a month consistently. More importantly, again, the knowledge and the network that then allowed me to go on to hit the big numbers that I'd always set out to hit and knew was possible from the start. Then across 2025, I did the boring part. I worked the long hours, 6, 7 day weeks. Then across 2025, I did the boring part of the entrepreneurship. I built a network, I built a skill set, working, 6, 7 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day, not really going out, but I was saving and stacking money. At least I was stacking cash, and with that cash, what I did was reinvest into mentors and become absolutely elite at sales. The better you get at a skill, the more money you make, especially in the space I'm in with high ticket closing. The better I got, the better offer I landed, which then increased, my earning potential. And this is where I started hitting the 15 to 20k months at 19, and I was literally about to turn 20. And this was fun. I was working then 5 days a week. Because I had leverage, I could take less calls and make more money. I started traveling a little bit, went to Marbella a couple of times, went to a couple of different cities, was able to, buy myself some nice clothes, also look after my family. And this is honestly the most fulfilled I've ever felt in my entire life. What I learned here was that, look, things can change so fast. Momentum is a real thing. I've never seen someone, and I stick by this, do something consistently, not give up and not succeed, right? That is the trick. For me, to my success, being consistent every single day, picking the path that not many people go on. And if you can just do that and stack skills in a network, well, you can't really fail. However, sales was never my own goal. My goal was to then build a business of my own. High ticket sales gave me the network, it gave me the cash flow to then go on and build a business. And from there, I've gone into sales management and sales coaching. A couple of other businesses on the side that now generates me 250k a year. And 2026 will generate me 500k profit at 20, and up with turning 21. I've only just turned 20, which is very surreal to say. But look, only 2 years ago, I was in a position where I had 17p in the bank. So look, if I can do it, why can't you? Now, if you're watching this thinking, look, this is the point where I need to change, my advice to you would be go and take the risk. Go and get a mentor. You're only one good connection away, one good skill set away from changing the trajectory of your whole life and being able to achieve the goals. But you see all these guys on social media, you think it's so far away, but I promise you, it's really not. And what I'll leave you with is, look, our brains are programmed to make safe decisions that keep us in comfortable positions. But at the end of the day, progression is not made from making comfortable decisions. It's made from making uncomfortable decisions and doing things you've never done before. How do you know what the risk looks like? How do you know what that jump looks like if you never take it? At the end of the day, you need to ask yourself who you want to become and then reverse engineer the steps you need to take and just get to work. Catch you in the next one.